with the Shipman's tale, we're back to the problem of wives and their manipulative ways. It's a fablio. It's essentially the Merchant's Tale, the story of May and January, with elements of the Wife of Bath. For example, we get to see the effects of Pluto's wife, Queen Proserpina's gifts to women, that she will give, remember, all women sufficient answer. Do you remember that? Well, here we get to see it clearly when the merchant's wife in the Shipman's Tale is crossed by her lover, the monk. Hold on one second. So that she's been clearly crossed by her lover, the monk, and the, quote, repaid loan. Her response is quick.
This wife was not affair nor afraid, but boldly she said, and that anon, Marie I defy, the false monk Don John. I keep not of his tokens never a deal. He took me certain gold that I what I will.
Has she been caught? She makes up an ingenious excuse before turning the argument towards the traditional debt a wife owes her husband. You never put too much fire on a grill. There's too much fire on these coals. This is really bad. She makes up an ingenious excuse before turning the argument towards the traditional debt a wife owes over her husband, sex.
The wife, for your honor, for God's sake I say, as be not wroth, don't be mad at me, but let us laugh and play. You shall my jolly body have to wed. In other words, I'm gonna give you my body. By God, I will not pay you but a bed. In other words, I'm not gonna pay you back I'm not gonna pay you back the debt I owe you for paying the monk, except in bed.
Okay, this idea was invented to limit men from committing adultery. You also see it being raised by the wife of Bath when she reminds us that wives want pleasure too.
So that the clericus be not with me wroth. I say yes. That they, the sexual organs, beeth market for both. That is to say, for office, in other words, for some sort of official use in the making of children, procreation, and for ease of engendur. The pleasures of conceiving children. There we not God displease. Remember, God says to wax and multiply. Why should men else in her book set that a man shall yield to his wife her debt? Like, this is the debt that husband and wives owe. Now, wherewith should he make his payment? How does a man make his payment, settle his books and his debts, if he no used his silly instrument? You know what that means.
Like May, the merchant's wife suffers too. If marriage is a sexual transaction, remember May's problem? Too much sex. January's too crazy. The merchant's wife's complaint is a little different. She complains about his lovemaking abilities.
But sith I am a wife, it sit not me to tell in no week of our privité, neither a bed nor none other plaza. It's not my place to be talking about our private life, airing our dirty laundry.
But
yet m'agree with most his nigardia. She's really bothered by his miserly behavior. And well you wot, but know that a woman naturally desiring things is six. A woman wants six things, as well as I. They would that her husband should be hardy, courageous, and wise, and riche, and thereto frayed, generous with their wealth, and buxom, obedient unto his wife, and fresh abed, and great in bed.
in other words, he fails on all fronts. But at least Alisoun, you remember her from The Miller's Tale, is well dressed. I also love how concrete this merchant's wife's desires are described. It reminds me of the Wife of Bath's tales in some ways. Like, what does a woman want? The merchant then is kind of like Blind January, or even the miller, but the miller is different because he articulates the desire not to know God's and his wife's privité. The wife's merchant, husband, actually laughs and he's willing to believe anything. The tale's great also because it shows how precarious being a merchant is in the Middle Ages. The anxiety of debt and credit. I mean, think about this coronavirus, how it's affected all my friends who own businesses. This anxiety is more than the accusations made in the estate satires that the merchant is essentially a miser. That sort of stereotype isn't played out in the Shipman's tale. He's not a miser counting his gold. He's a businessman worried about his accounting.
We've, quote this man, little canst thou divine the curious business that we have. For of us chapmen, merchants, also God me save, and by that Lord that cleped is Sant Eve, scarcely among 12 10 shall thrive. So if there are 12 merchants, only 10 will make it, continually lasting unto our age. We may well make cheer and good visage, we may look like we're having fun and be positive, and drive forth the world as it may be, and keep in our estate in privité. But we conceal privately our true worries, till we be dead, or else that we play a pilgrimage or going out of our way.
The merchant's private anxieties versus public displays of wealth is at the source of her displeasure with marriage. As the wife of a rich merchant, or so she thinks, she expects to be better arrayed. This point is made at the very beginning of the story and leads to a curious narrative disruption that seems to persist, as you've already noted, throughout Chaucer's work. It's found in the opening lines of the tale. Maxie!
A merchant whilom dwelled at Saint Denis, that rich it was for which men held him wise. A wife he had of excellent beauté, incompagnable and revelous was she, which is a thing that causeth more dispense than worth is all the share and reverence that men him done at feast and at dances.
The wife is described as being revelous. And revelous means more than merely sociable, as the glosses sometimes make it out to be. She is like Perkin Reveler in The Cook's Tale. She's a party girl. She's fun. She likes to party. She's probably comparable as well to the Franklin's son. And that requires much dispense, right? Or expenses, which is a better gloss. And that's what concerns the merchant as he sits in his office or counting house, counting all his money.
And up into his counter house goeth he, to reckon with himself, well may be of thilke year, how that it was with him stood, and how that he dispensed had he good, and if that he increased were or none. His bookes and his bagges many one he leaf before him on his counting board.
We're made to think she has no clothes. We're made to think she has no clothes. But does she? Or is she that kind of rich lady who has a wardrobe filled with Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent, Chanel, and says, I don't have anything to wear? This suspicion comes about in the opening lines of the tale itself.
But woe is him that payin must for all. The silly husband, algate he must pay. He must us clothe, and he must us array, all for his own worship richly, in which array we dance jollily. And if that he not may, par aventure, or else list no switch dispense endure, but thinketh it is wasted and a lost, then must other payen for our cost. Other, if he doesn't want to pay for our expenses, for our fun, then someone else will have to pay. Or lend us gold, and that is perilous.
I need Maxie. Can you yell Maxie to come out? I need Maxie. I need Maxie to come out. But that sounds like a threat. But let me ask you a question. Who's doing the talking here? Did you notice the pronouns? There's a shift from the third person to the first person. It's clearly a woman. It's clearly a wife. This interjection to the first person plural raises a question. Pause, I'm gonna need your help. Pause, let me finish this. Some have speculated that the Shipman's tale was originally written for the wife of Bath as her possible second tale. But this appearance of a wife in the voice of a shipman, and a shipman is not a sailor, he is someone who owns a ship. He's like a merchant too. He's a merchant, a sea merchant. It completely disorients the reader. I mean, it raises questions. Is this another one of those weird, disorienting games we see in medieval literature? Like Chaucer's Envoy at the end of the Clerk's Tale? Or does this show the ad hoc qualities of the Canterbury Tales itself? How Chaucer is moving parts, or maybe one of the copyists of the first manuscript versions of it, moving tales around to put them into characters' mouths, because not all the characters did get a tale. The tale obviously leads to lots of literary questions. And the next tale, which raises the most, is the Prior's Tale, and then the first tales about the nature of textuality itself in the Middle Ages, Melody.
Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell.